We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Southern California is its largest earthquake in 2 decades, a 6.4 magnitude trembler that caused substantial damage at a military facility, but otherwise only minor injuries in the sparsely populated area.
A Hong Kong street artist is charged with assaulting a police officer and criminal damage, the first prosecution against an anti-government protester since the city was rocked by unprecedented demonstrations.
Iran demands Britain immediately release an oil tanker it has detained in Gibraltar, accusing it of acting at the bidding of the United States.
And President Donald Trump sings the praises of the U.S. military and American heroes of the past 2.5 centuries, skirting politics in an Independence Day speech in Washington.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. The United States Geological Survey said a 6.4 magnitude earthquake hit Southern California on Thursday at 10:33 a.m. local time near the Searles Valley in San Bernardino County. Here's a look inside a damaged store in Ridgecrest, California. Take a look.
Scary. I didn't know what to do. It was my first actual experience with the earthquake. So I was cashing a check and the guy, he just grabbed the counter and then I was like, everybody out. There was a kid about maybe 18 years old and he was scared. The fridges were actually opening up. Everything that was on the shelves came crashing down. The wine, all I heard was just and it just fell. Wow. Everything was it was very scary.
Police and fire officials say at least 20 people have sustained minor injuries. The shallow quake struck at a depth of 5.4 miles in the vast desert region, lasting multiple seconds, with residents as far away as Los Angeles saying they felt the tremor. Although the quake in the most populous U.S. state of California revived fears of the big one, a powerful tremor along the San Andreas Fault that could devastate major cities in Southern California, President Trump was quick to reassure that it wasn't. The earthquake was the largest in Southern California since 1999 when a 7.1 magnitude quake struck the 29 Palms Marine Corps base, according to the Los Angeles Times. Meanwhile, authorities warned that the trembler might not be the day's last. Caltech seismologist Lucy Jones tells a news conference that residents will continue having a lot of aftershocks, adding that some may be as strong as magnitude 5.
One should always be preparing for a big one. This does not make it less likely. There is about a 1 in 20 chance that this location will be having an even bigger earthquake within the next few days, that we have not yet seen the biggest earthquake of the sequence. It's certain that this area is going to be shaken a lot today, and some of those aftershocks will probably exceed magnitude 5, which means they will become damaging. Expect this is far enough away from the San Andreas that any impact on that system will be minimal. The last time we had an earthquake in Southern California above magnitude 6 was 1999. The previous decade had about 8 magnitude 6s. So this has been an extremely quiet, abnormal time.
The Kern County Fire Department said the Ridgecrest Regional Hospital was evacuated. The service has responded to nearly 24 incidents, ranging from medical assistance for minor injuries to fires. Thursday's epicenter was in or on the edge of the U.S. Navy's sprawling desert bomb testing range known as China Lake. The Naval Air Weapons Station covers 1.1 million acres and strictly controls the airspace above it. Inside, the Navy develops and tests missiles, bombs, artillery shells, and other war ordnance, and the aircraft used to deliver it.
The earthquake is near China Lake and Ridgecrest, so the area to the east of the southernmost part of the San Andreas Fault. The nearest fault is the Little Lake Fault, and that it might be associated with it, but we don't know. We have to have a field geologist to tell us. It is a relatively uninhabited, it's a sparsely inhabited area, so the number of people who would have received damage is much lower.
Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, declared an emergency for the areas affected as concern for potential aftershocks ramped up.
In commemoration of the Philippine-American Friendship Day, our program ASEAN in Focus had a special guest in the person of Mr. Philip Roskamp, Counselor for Public Diplomacy at the U.S. Embassy. During the talks, he talked about how the Filipino youth can take advantage of their program called Education USA. Let's listen in.
The fact that there was such a huge turnout and everybody had such a great time really says something about the friendship. I think for us, there are sort of three ways we try and think about the relationship. There's the friendship between our people, the partnership between our governments, and then the alliance between our militaries. And I think in all three of those areas, we're doing some amazing stuff together. So, there are 4 million Filipino Americans in the United States, which is one of the largest Asian American diasporas. At any given time, there are about 350,000 Americans here in the Philippines. So we have this sort of real bedrock of friendship. And so, Philippine American Friendship Day, started in 1956. If we fast forward to today, we've even got an entire month in the United States dedicated to Filipinos and American. It's a Filipino American History Month every October. One of our most important lines of effort or engagements with Filipino youth is on education. What I find is that Filipino youth, they're really interested in finding opportunities to not just be competitive amongst their peers in the Philippines, but globally competitive. And so one of the best ways of doing that is through education. We have a service at the embassy. It's called Education USA. It is 100% free. It is 100% objective. It helps Filipino students find the right fit for them in terms of education. What Education USA is here to do is to help Filipinos who are thinking about undergraduate or master's or PhD studies. What is the best fit? And if that happens to be in the school in the United States, that's fantastic. And so Education USA will provide free advising. We do information sessions on how to do college applications. I would say last year we had an increase of over 7% of Filipino students going to the United States. So now we're at about 3,200 Filipinos at U.S. schools, and we've got about 460 American students at Filipino schools. We would love to see more Americans come here, and we're talking to Ched. Just look up Education USA Philippines, and you can see what upcoming events there are. So in addition to the graduate school fairs in September that I mentioned, we do undergraduate fairs every spring where we bring over about 4.
Spring is September?
Spring is in February and March. And so we will bring out about 4 dozen U.S. universities, both in Cebu and Manila. In terms of the parts of the country where they want to go, New York, Texas, and California tend to be really big draws. If they have relatives or friends there, they've got a safety net that's built in. Either they might live together, or maybe even just go over for dinner to get adobo or whatever it might be on a Saturday night. So the catchphrase is, you got to do your homework, and the way that we help you do that is by going to Education USA. So go look us up online, or you can email us at educationusaph@state.gov.
U.S. President Donald Trump has hailed the brave men and women of the U.S. military at a 4th of July celebration. President Trump sang the praises of the U.S. military and American heroes of the past 2.5 centuries as he skirted politics in a rousing Independence Day speech in Washington. In front of a massive statue of a seated Abraham Lincoln, the heroic 19th century president, President Trump used a traditionally politics-free holiday to deliver shout-outs to each arm of the military, as well as singling out first responders and the controversial Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement agencies that have been criticized for their treatment of migrants.
to young Americans across our country, now is your chance to join our military and make a truly great statement in life, and you should do it. For over 65 years, no enemy air force has managed to kill a single American soldier because the skies belong to the United States of America. Through centuries, our soldiers have always pointed toward home, proclaiming, "This we'll defend." They live by the creed of Douglas MacArthur: "In war, there is no substitute for victory." They are the greatest soldiers on earth.
President Trump originally wanted a grand military parade for the holiday, ostensibly inspired by France's rollout of its military might on its own National Day. But instead, he got a scaled-back version with some U.S. armored vehicles parked for display and a flyover by the president's own Air Force One jet, the B-2 bomber, attack helicopters, and the Navy's Blue Angels flying team.
The U.S. marks the 4th of July celebrations with fireworks over the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Take a look.
Meanwhile, as the United States celebrated its 243rd year of independence, the small town of Safety Harbor, Florida, launched its own annual 4th of July parade and celebration. Jay Rosquitas reports.
As the U.S. celebrates its 243rd year of independence, the small town of Safety Harbor, Florida, launched its annual 4th of July parade and celebration. After the parade concluded on Main Street, the American Legion Post No. 238 hosted a patriotic ceremony open to the public. From singing the national anthem to singing traditional American theme songs, the citizens of Safety Harbor embraced their patriotism. The ceremony also included honoring the U.S. Armed Forces in flag guard formation.
Well, we're just lucky to have great people that want to put these parades on. As you saw, Ruth Burgess has been doing this for many years. She's affiliated with the American Legion, and they're very active in, organizing the event. So between Ruth, the American Legion, and then all the volunteers coming together, it turns out to be a pretty good parade.
Despite a population of over 16,000, the city of Safety Harbor continues to make ways for their community to celebrate achievements, letting the public know what to expect.
You can expect to have a lot of festivities. You can expect to see an awesome parade. You can expect to see a lot of both residents and people visiting Safety Harbor just celebrating a great holiday.
As for Independence Day, the achievements of freedom still hold high value to these citizens.
I just wish everybody would be sympathetic to our country and love our country. Freedom is not free. All of our veterans have served to give us this freedom, to allow us to have this day. So I think we should all celebrate them and just honor them.
We can never take our freedoms or liberties for granted, and this is a great time of year to remember what these freedoms and liberties stand for, and just be very appreciative of everything that we have. I'm Joe Ayub, Mayor of the City of Safety Harbor in Florida, and you're watching Net 25.
Reporting from Safety Harbor, Florida, I'm Jay Rosquitas, always one with 25.
Thank you, Jay. Eagle News International will be right back.
Australia's government warned student Mr. Alex Sigley not to return to North Korea a day after he was released from detention by Pyongyang under mysterious circumstances. The 29-year-old Australian student said he was now planning to return to normal life after being freed and flying to Japan, but offered no details of his detention. Mr. Sigley, who disappeared without a trace around June 23, prompting a week of deep concern about his fate, said he was okay. But he declined to disclose why he was held and how he was treated. A statement released by representatives of his family on Friday said he had been reunited with his wife, Yuka, and would not be conducting any interviews or holding a press conference. The Australia's detention came just days before a G20 summit and a landmark meeting between President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Trump was intimately involved in the case of University of Virginia student Otto Warmbier, who was imprisoned during a tour of the authoritarian state in 2016. Doctors said Warmbier suffered severe brain damage while in detention, fell into a coma, and died days after arriving back in the United States, aged 22. Sigley was much more familiar with the country and spoke fluent Korean. He ran tours to North Korea and a number of social media sites, which usually had a stream of apolitical content about life in one of the world's most secretive nations. His blog posts focused on everyday Pyongyang, everything from the city's dining scene to North Korean app reviews, and he married his wife there last year.
Hong Kong street artist was charged on Friday with assaulting a police officer and criminal damage, the first prosecution against an anti-government protester since the city was rocked by unprecedented demonstrations. Sparked by a law that would have allowed extraditions to mainland China, the city has witnessed 3 huge peaceful rallies as well as civil disobedience and violence from a hardcore of younger protesters who have besieged the police headquarters and on Monday stormed the city's parliament. Authorities have vowed to hunt those behind the unrest that has plunged the semi-autonomous city's Beijing-backed government into crisis. Now, Poon Ho Chiu, 31, appeared in court on Friday over his alleged involvement in the blockade of the city's police headquarters on June 21. He was also charged with disorderly behavior for throwing eggs at police outside the headquarters during the 6-hour siege. A well-known activist nicknamed Painter for his street art, Poon was remanded in custody and faces up to 10 years in jail if convicted. He was one of the only protesters during the police siege to show himself unmasked. Now in court, his lawyer said he was assaulted by police who spoke to him in Mandarin, the predominant language on the Chinese mainland. The judge said the court could not investigate the claims and directed him to the police complaints procedure. Forensic investigators have been combing through the trashed parliament for fingerprint and DNA evidence to help identify protesters who stormed the building and left its walls daubed with slogans such as "Hong Kong is not China" and a colonial-era flag pinned to the legislature's podium. Police have yet to release a tally on how many have been arrested during the month of protests, but local media have reported dozens have been detained so far.
Iran demanded Friday that Britain immediately release an oil tanker it has detained in Gibraltar, accusing it of acting at the bidding of the United States. A senior foreign ministry official described the UK move as unacceptable in a meeting with British Ambassador Rob Macaire, who had been summoned to hear a formal protest, the ministry said in a statement. The Secretary of Iran's Expediency Council, a key advisory and arbitration body, warned that if Britain failed to release the tanker, Iran would be forced to take tit-for-tat action against a British vessel. Authorities in Gibraltar, a British overseas territory on Spain's southern tip, at the western entrance to the Mediterranean said they suspected the tanker was carrying crude to Syria in violation of EU sanctions. Spanish Foreign Minister Josep Borrell told reporters the vessel was detained at the request of the United States. European Union sanctions against war-torn Syria have been in force since late 2011. The 28-member bloc has imposed sanctions on Syrian officials, including government ministers, over their role in the violent repressions of civilians. It has frozen the assets of around 70 entities and introduced an embargo on Syrian oil, investment restrictions, and freeze on Syrian central bank assets within the EU. The tanker's detention comes just days after Iran announced it would exceed the uranium enrichment limit set under the 2015 deal to allay concerns it might seek to develop a nuclear weapons capability, something it has always denied.
In other news, 200 corpses, including those of people believed to have been executed by the Islamic State group, were found near the Syrian city of Raqqa, according to a local official and a war monitor on Wednesday. Yasser Al-Khamis and the Britain-based Observatory for Human Rights said the mass grave contained the bodies of 5 middle-aged men in orange jumpsuits of the kind typically worn by ISIS hostages. They were shackled and shot in the head, and they were believed to have been killed more than 2 years ago, he said, adding that his team was not immediately able to identify them. The grave also included the bodies of 3 women who were believed to have been stoned to death. A local official said their skulls were severely fractured and displayed signs of stoning. The digger said his team first discovered the mass grave early last month on the southern edges of Raqqa, ISIS' former Syrian capital. He said as many as 800 people could be buried there in total. Its discovery could help identify even more of the several thousand people whose fates remain unknown, including foreigners imprisoned by ISIS. ISIS took full control of the city of Raqqa in early 2014 and made it the de facto Syrian capital of its infamous cross-border caliphate. U.S.-backed forces ousted ISIS from the devastated city in October of 2017, leaving the Raqqa Civil Council to run it.
The UN Human Rights Chief lamented Friday the erosion of rule of law in Venezuela, pointing to attacks on political opponents and activists, including using torture and killings.
Essential institutions and the rule of law in Venezuela have been eroded. The exercise of freedom of opinion, expression, association and assembly, and the right to participate in public life entails a risk of reprisals and repression.
The report pointed out that, according to account by Caracas, nearly 7,000 people have been killed during security operations in Venezuela in the past year and a half. In her report, she especially pointed a finger at Venezuelan police special forces and urged the authorities to dissolve the unit. Overall, she said that attempts to exercise basic rights like freedom of opinion, expression, association, and assembly entails a risk of reprisals and repression. The report also decried a wide range of other grave rights violations in Venezuela, which is caught in an economic crisis and a political standoff between President Nicolas Maduro's government and National Assembly leader Juan Guaido. The opposition leader Guaido declared himself interim president earlier this year and has been recognized by the United States and more than 50 countries. The oil-rich country is also suffering from hyperinflation and shortages of basic goods from food to medicine, a crisis that has forced millions to flee. In
Singapore, school children are paying a heavy price for the success in global education rankings, with rising numbers seeking psychiatric help as they struggle to cope with the relentless pressure for academic excellence. Children are reporting symptoms of anxiety and stress related to schools as early as primary school, experts warn, and there have been extreme cases where pupils have been driven to suicide. Youths often face long days at school, hours of homework, and are then pushed by parents to have private tuition, which is having an impact on mental well-being. A recent report found that overall, the city's pupils reported higher levels of anxiety than average.
Even though you're replacing streaming with banding, the fact remains that the choices you make, the bands that you are placed in, will inevitably have consequences for your progression to post-secondary education. It won't be easy to change these well-entrenched attitudes and behaviors in Singapore, and beliefs as well. A university education is considered by most people in Singapore much more prestigious than, say, a vocational education. And it's not easy to change this, even though the Ministry of Education is trying to emphasize the need for skills, workplace specific skills, rather than paper qualifications alone.
Now, in a bid to reduce stress in its schools, Singapore is embarking upon reforms that will scrap some academic tests and change the rigid streaming process. The move comes at a time when more authorities in Asia are being forced to assess if pupils are being overwhelmed by pressure to reform or to perform. Hong Kong's Child Fatality Review listed problems with schoolwork among one of the key reasons for teen suicide, and Japan reported its highest youth suicide rate in 30 years in 2016 to 2017, with officials admitting there is an annual spike on September 1, the start of the new school year. Singapore has placed education at the heart of its development since independence in the 1960s and now tops the PISA international rankings, a system dubbed the World Cup of Education for maths, reading, and science. Authorities hope the reforms can go some way to ease the pressure. Measures include axing some exams in both primary and secondary school and only grouping students according to ability in more academic subjects such as maths and science rather than separating them into streams for all subjects.
Thousands of high school students in France received only provisional results from their baccalaureate exams on Friday due to a strike by hundreds of teachers who have refused to return marked papers. Around 700 striking teachers did not return their markings by Thursday night's deadline, representing around 30,000 exam papers, French Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer said. Affected students, who are mostly in the areas of Créteil and Versailles, near Paris, and in the cities of Dijon and Toulouse, will receive provisional marks based on their performance results during the year. Their final grade will be adjusted once the missing exam papers are returned. Most of the 743,000 students who sat their exams this summer, known as the BAC, got their final results on time.
C'est le fruit de notre travail parce qu'on a quand même beaucoup bossé et puis bon bah next maintenant. Bravo ma fille. T'as quoi?
Alors ça se passe bien, j'ai eu la mention bien au bac et vraiment je suis content parce que j'étais stressé un peu, mais ça va, vraiment ça va, soulagé, on va passer des bonnes vacances.
Donc c'est important d'avoir le bac finalement.
Ouais.
Protesting markers are trying to convince the government to reopen talks on an overhaul of the French baccalaureate from 2021, which will see more continuous assessment and less dependence on final exams. French President Emmanuel Macron pledged to overhaul the qualification during his election campaign in 2017, saying it was failing to adequately prepare teenagers for university and the modern job market. This year's exams have also been hit by the leak of the math paper set by around half of students. Police arrested 21 people, including 19 high school children, this week in Marseille and Paris after the paper was shared via text message and WhatsApp in June.
Crowds of jubilant Sudanese took to the streets of Khartoum to celebrate a landmark deal between protest leaders and the country's ruling generals, aimed at turning the page on months of political unrest. Take a look. The power-sharing deal reached in the early hours after 2 days of hard-won talks, brokered by Ethiopian and African Union mediators, came after a previous round of negotiations collapsed in May over who should lead the new body, a civilian or a soldier. African Union mediator Mohamed El Hassan Lebat told reporters the two sides agreed on establishing a sovereign council with a rotating military and civilian presidency for a period of 3 years or a little more. Sudan has been gripped by political deadlock since the generals ousted longtime President Omar al-Bashir in a palace coup in April following months of mass protests nationwide. Lebat did not specify the exact makeup of the new ruling body, but prominent protest leader Ahmed al-Rabi told AFP it would comprise 6 civilians, 5 of them protest movement nominees, and 5 military representatives. The Sudanese Professionals Association, which took the lead in organizing the long months of protests, said a final draft of the agreement would be ready for signing by the two sides on Monday. It said the transition would last 3 years and 3 months and confirmed the first 21 months will be presided by the military. The last 18 months will be presided by the civilians.
We'll be back with more news right after this break.
Health is our most important.
Philippine monetary officials have renewed confidence in hitting inflation targets following the fall of June's inflation rate to 2.7% from 3% in the previous month. The Philippine Statistics Authority attributed the big drop to the second consecutive slide of inflation and the deceleration of the education index. Last June's inflation rate was way lower than years ago, 5.2%. Average inflation in the first half this year stood at 3.4%. Excluding volatile items such as food and oil products, core inflation slowed to 3.3% from May's 3.5%, bringing the 6-month average to 3.7%. Core inflation in June 2018 was higher at 4.3%.
This share of the commodity group to the overinflation was 39.8%. Specifically, the items that primarily contributed to the June 2019 inflation of the food group were vegetables at 9.5% inflation and 28.1% share. Second is fish, 3.8% inflation and 24.8% share, and meat at 3.3% inflation and 23.5% share.
Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Benjamin Diokno told reporters that the inflation rate last month, which is within the central bank's 2.2% to 3% target band, is consistent with the BSP's prevailing assessment that inflation will firmly settle within the target range of 3% positive to 1 percentage point for 2019 and 2020. In its meeting last June 21, the BSP's Policy-Making Monetary Board cut the central bank's average inflation forecast for this year to 2.9% from 3.1% last May, and the 2020 to 2.7% from 3%.
Inflation in the National Capital Region likewise moved at a slower pace at 3.0% in June 2019. Its annual rate in May 2019 was observed at 3.4% and June 2018 at 5.8%.
All right, before we go to our next news, we have the latest on the California earthquake. A magnitude 5.4 earthquake was reported early Friday near Ridgecrest, California, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Now, this trembler was one of the strongest of the hundreds of aftershocks following the largest earthquake with an epicenter in Southern California in 2 decades. The latest quake at 4:07 a.m. local time, 5 miles from Ridgecrest was felt as far away as Los Angeles, Long Beach, Laguna Hills, San Bernardino, Fresno, and Las Vegas, according to the USGS, and we'll give you more updates as we follow this developing story. Next business news, the Malaysian producer of Hollywood film The Wolf of Wall Street and stepson of the country's disgraced ex-leader was Friday charged with illegally receiving almost $250 million from State Fund 1MDB. Riza Aziz pleaded not guilty to 5 charges of money laundering when he appeared in a Kuala Lumpur court. He's accused of receiving $248.17 million in 2011 and 2012 in illegal proceeds that originated from the scandal-hit Malaysian Fund. The money was sent to bank accounts of Hollywood production company Red Granite Pictures, which Riza co-founded, according to the charges, as well as The Wolf of Wall Street, a 2013 film starring Leonardo DiCaprio about a huge financial scam. Red Granite produced the Jim Carrey movie Dumb and Dumber 2 and Daddy's Home. Billions of dollars were looted from 1MDB, allegedly by ex-Prime Minister Najib Razak and his cronies, who spent it on everything from a yacht to pricey artwork in a globe-spanning fraud.
Samsung Electronics said Friday it expects operating profit to tumble 56% for the second quarter of this year in the face of a weakening chip market. The world's largest maker of smartphones and memory chips has enjoyed record profits in recent years despite a series of setbacks, but is now struggling with chip prices falling as global supply increases while demand weakens. Operating profit for the April to June period is forecast to reach around 6.5 trillion won, down 56% from a year earlier, the firm said in a statement. Revenue is expected to fall 4.2% to 56 trillion won. Samsung is scheduled to report final results later this month. The firm is the flagship subsidiary of the giant Samsung Group. by far the biggest of the family-controlled conglomerates that dominate business in the world's 11th largest economy, and it is crucial to South Korea's economic health. Samsung's share price was down 1.2% in early trade.
Electric scooters promise to revolutionize transportation in Latin America's traffic-clogged, smog-choked cities, but critics say they've only added to the freewheeling chaos. Like metallic mushrooms sprouting overnight, electric scooters from rideshare companies appeared by the thousands last year on streets and sidewalks from Bogota and Lima to Sao Paulo and Mexico City. For around $50 plus a per-minute charge of about 10 US cents, anyone with a smartphone and a bank card can unlock these scooters and zip silently through the pandemonium of Latin America's biggest cities, some of the world's most congested. They then leave the many vehicles at their destination. As an added bonus, monopatines, as they're known in Spanish, help cut down on the notorious pollution plaguing the region's megacities by giving commuters an electric alternative, according to advocates. But as it did in Europe and the United States, the scooter's arrival has also sparked controversy, amplified in the case of Latin America by the sheer size of its cities and the anarchy on its roads.
Pero sí, luego de repente encuentras 2, 3, 4 ahí tirados. Los acomodas y no sé, a lo mejor pasa alguien enojado, envidioso, no sé, y los tira, sea de quien sea,
Riding down sidewalks, up one-way streets, and into accidents at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour. Typically with no helmets and little experience, scooter users have exacerbated the very chaos the new technology was supposed to alleviate, according to critics.
The Robot Soccer World Cup is underway in Sydney. More than 170 university and research teams from around the world gathered in Sydney Thursday for the annual RoboCup event that sees a variety of robots take to the football pitch in a range of competitions while seeking to advance artificial intelligence and robotics. Professor Claude Sammet is chair of the RoboCup organizing committee and mentors the team.
So it's a competition that's been going for more than 20 years now, and the idea is that to provide a fun challenge for universities and researchers to develop new technology in robotics. Well, we first started competing in 1999, and we were lucky if we got the robots to stand up at all and not fall over. And we're using smaller, different robots. And over the time, the hardware technology has improved and the software technology improved so that we can play quite reasonable games. It's still not human standard, but they're good games. Yeah, so even though we're playing a game of soccer, all the technology that goes into them transfers to other real-world things. So, for example, a lot of our recent graduates have gone to work for companies that are doing self-driving cars. So, and all sorts of other things. So it's the soccer is a fun motivation, but it's the underlying technology that's really important.
He says the robot teams are autonomous on the field, spending months to years training before the tournament. The tournament was started in 1997 with the aim of establishing a robot soccer team by 2050 capable of beating the human World Cup champions.
And our Los Angeles bureau was up to the challenge of covering one of the country's largest tech convention, E3. Eva and Alan Basillaje are at the scene.
Eagle News once more storms the shores of the world's biggest video game expo of the year, E3. It'll be a daunting challenge running the gamut of exhibitors, products, and emerging tech at the Los Angeles Convention Center, but I accept the challenge. Needless to say, this will be my most daring single-player solo adventure ever. Oh, hello.
current 3-day coverage of E3 will be a blend of video game news and at times seemingly unrelated stories. You'll see what we mean. But to start things off, we decided to take a look at those peripherals and accessories that enhance the gaming experience and give the edge to serious competitors. First off, PC gaming.
We're showcasing Lexip's space controller. This space peripheral, this space controller, is meant to be played with space games and city building games. You can entirely tilt it forward, backward, and side to side, and using the little joystick on the side, piloting the space throttle of the engine and the left-right axis of the ship, right? And what basically I'm doing right here is piloting a spacecraft, an entire spacecraft, that's one thing, with just one hand, leaving my second hand entirely available for all the keyboard shortcuts that these games require. Exactly like little kids play the spacecraft thing, they run everywhere and go meow like this, right? And you do exactly the same movement but on the peripheral, and you actually become the ship itself.
Light guns have been like a very popular gaming genre in the past, but the problem is they kind of went away. CRT TVs went away, and there really hasn't been a solution for this generation of consoles. So we actually developed this technology. It uses a very low power invisible laser, and it utilizes this camera. It's an IR, what we call our IR station. This is wired to your console, again, either Xbox One or PlayStation 4. It knows exactly where you're pointing with this invisible laser as you point it at the screen. So very, very precise, no lag, to really kind of reinvent, light gun gaming and bring it to the new consoles.
The Xbox Wireless Elite Controller Series 2. It's our second iteration of our Elite controller. What we've got is, we've got a controller where we've got rubberized grips around the bottom and the top of the controller. What that does is it gives you a nice, firm and comfortable way to hold the controller. It also allows for different styles of holding the controller, which is nice. 3 positions for our triggers, which is great because it gives you options based on the games. Maybe you want the full stroke for a racing game, but maybe the really short one for a first-person shooter. New this year, we introduced the ability to change the tension of the thumbsticks themselves. We offer 3 positions, a high, a medium, and a low. And what that does is it just gives the gamer more options to play the way that they want to play and give them more control.
Proximat is, we like to call it the mouse pad for virtual reality. It's a mat made out of anti-fatigue material made for working with the built-in chaperone system in the virtual reality headsets to keep you centered within your VR space, to keep you safe, and to keep you comfy. This gives you the feeling underneath your feet so you know when you're stepping out of your space. It's easy to ignore the visuals, but it's real hard to ignore something you can feel.
There's 2 things Technisport does that other chair companies really don't do. And again, starting with that is the steel frame. So they're backed by a lifetime warranty, so if by some accident you did manage to break a steel chair, you get another one. The other thing they do is every single color that you see here is tied to a charity, and that charity offers 3% towards whatever it is depending on the sale of the chair. So for example, this chair right here would be going to Alzheimer's research because it's gray and black. Cancer's riddled my family, so it's a very important cause to me, so I always support the pink chairs for breast cancer. Thunder Gaming is actually one of our sponsors, so they decided that our chair was this chair that they wanted to support, and they offer them in their arenas. And this is Esports Arena. They have hundreds of our chairs, and they have several locations throughout the Midwest.
A good controller or gaming chair can certainly help make the difference between almost winning
and completely dominating your opponent. In games, of course, such as
Borderlands at its core has always been a co-op experience that we really wanted people to be able to engage and play with their friends or play with people online. We have couch co-op. We still have that in Borderlands 3 because it's always been important since day one in the franchise. So there's a multitude of ways that we're doing that in the new entry. If you saw the theater presentation, you got to see we're allowing people to kind of send items through the mail system now. So if you find something really cool or something that somebody that a friend of yours might enjoy, you can send it to them.
Would there be any chance of them sending something to their buddy that they may not appreciate?
Well, hopefully there's nothing in the game that people don't like, right? But yeah, you can send whatever. That goes with grenades and different like shields and things like that too. So maybe if there is one that has some type of debuff on it or some type of dynamic change that can happen if you do a thing, then you can kind of stick it in there and maybe it'll get past and they'll be like, oh yeah, there's a lot of health on this, oh, but it explodes and hurts me whenever it happens, or something like that. We want to make sure that people can play literally any way that they want to. They can make their Vault Hunters the way that they want, they can style them and customize them the way that they want, and they can play solo or cooperatively, and it still works just as good.
After opening E3 with a ceremonial ribbon cutting, Mayor Eric Garcetti spoke with Eagle News about his thoughts on how the future of video gaming could positively impact Los Angeles.
We are so excited to have E3 here. It's our 20th time hosting. This is the center, not only of video gaming, but of esports in the world. And this is our biggest convention of the year. We love opening up LA. We've got engineers, we've got companies, we've got jobs, we've got players, we've got now competitors. And because the Olympics are coming, we hope to maybe see in the future esports can be a part of a worldwide federation, maybe even be in the Olympics.
In keeping with today's theme of peripherals, I decided to hide in the corner of my co-reporter's field of vision to do the closing all by myself. Oh, hello.
Hello. And goodbye for now to our Eagle News viewers. But don't worry, this farewell is only temporary, because our exploration of the Electronic Entertainment Expo is far from done. Reporting from the Los Angeles Convention Center at E3.
Day 1.
This is Yvonne Allen for Eagle News, and we are 1 with 25.
All right, and we'll be back with more news right after this break.
alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
The 3,000-year-old quartzite head of Egyptian boy king Tutankhamun was auctioned off for $6 million Thursday in London, despite a fierce outrage from Cairo. Christie's auction house sold the 28.5-centimeter relic for £4,746,250 at one of its most controversial auctions in years. No information about the buyer was disclosed. The famous pharaoh's finely chiseled face, its calm eyes and puffed lips, emoting a sense of eternal peace, came from the private Risandro collection of ancient art that Christie's last parceled off for £3 million in 2016. But angry Egyptian officials wanted Thursday's sale halted and the treasure returned. Egypt's Antiquities Ministry said it would hold a special meeting at the start of next week to discuss its next steps in the standoff. Former Egyptian Antiquities Minister Zahi Hawass told AFP by telephone from Cairo that the piece appeared to have been stolen in the 1970s from the Karnak Temple complex just north of Luxor. Egypt's own campaign to recover lost art gained momentum after numerous works went missing during the looting that accompanied former President Hosni Mubarak's fall from power in 2011. Cairo has managed to regain hundreds of looted and stolen artifacts by working with both auction houses and international cultural groups. But it was never able to provide evidence for the Tutankhamun bust being illegally obtained. Christie's told AFP that it would not sell any work where there isn't clear title of ownership.
As a background, the discovery by a British archaeologist of his tomb in Egypt's Valley of the Kings in 1922 made Tutankhamun a star more than 3,000 years after his death. Take a look. Howard Carter needed 6 years of excavations to discover the burial site of the young pharaoh, and when he did, he found it intact. Inside the tomb was a unique treasure, more than 4,500 funeral objects and hundreds of kilos of gold. During a reign which lasted less than 10 years, Tutankhamun failed to make his mark. Pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, he acceded to the throne in 1333 BC at the age of 9. Succeeding his father, Akhenaton, he went about restoring the cult of traditional deities his father had earlier replaced by a kind of monotheism. On his death, Tutankhamun's successors, unimpressed by his taste for reform, systematically erased his name from official royal lists. It was as if he never existed. Even his tomb is not the one he was ultimately destined for. Its small size and unusual layout suggest it had not been completed at the time of the young pharaoh's death. Tutankhamun had a frail constitution. He suffered from malaria and at some point also badly fractured his left leg. He died when he was 19 years old. More than 33 centuries after his reign, he still remembered, preserved, aided by his solid gold death mask.
Wow. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.